Hey everyone, I'm Vladimir Dutit. We are watching all the news happening in the United States and all around the world. Check out these screens behind me. If they are coming into our CBS News affiliates and stations across the country, if that news is happening, it's coming to you right here. This is CBS News 24/7. Outrage mounts in Israel as tens of thousands of protesters continue pushing for a Gaza ceasefire deal while the U.S. government announces charges against the leaders of Hamas. 100-degree temperatures for 100 straight days. We are tracking the dangerous heat wave that is still scorching parts of the western U.S. and the impact on students as the school year begins. Plus, systematic dishonesty and decades of failure. That's just part of what investigators said led to one of Britain's worst residential fires. We've got details from the new report into that fatal Grenfell Tower story from a couple of years ago. We're going to bring that to you in just a little bit. But let us get to the top story this morning, the Israel-Hamas war. Protests continue to erupt in Tel Aviv. Folks there are pushing for an end to the war in Gaza. Thousands packed into the city again yesterday to demand more from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. They want him to reach a deal that will free the remaining hostages. Meanwhile, the United States has charged the masterminds behind the October 7th attack. It is the first formal criminal repercussion from the United States, and the Justice Department says it will not be the last. CBS News senior national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata is here to break down the charges filed in that criminal complaint. Charlie, help our audience understand. This is kind of unprecedented.
It is unprecedented, Vlad, and it is largely symbolic considering that a number of men who have been named in that complaint are dead, and most of the rest are in hiding. So the question is, what does it mean? First of all, CBS News has learned that the criminal case was actually brought in February when these men were alive, and there would have been the possibility that they would have been brought into U.S. custody. So there is a real sense behind filing this criminal complaint. But where we are now, then you have to start thinking about, well, why now? Why the timing of this announcement? And as it was spelled out yesterday, it's right after the killing of Hersh Goldberg Poland in Israel, an American, very high profile. I've interviewed his parents. CBS has interviewed his parents a number of times. They've spoken in the United States. And so this is really a message, not so much to Hamas. I mean, they are considered a criminal organization and have been in criminal leadership, but more of a message to the United States that the State Department and Criminal Justice Department is doing something in order to go after people who have been killing Americans.
Charlie, help our audience understand. I've gotten a lot of questions on social media about this in relation to these new charges, which is the United States, Israel, partners that we are working with diplomatically in Egypt, in Qatar, are represented by members of Hamas. I understand that they're political members, but the people that are holding these talks with the Israelis in partnership with the United States, who are they, and are they on this list? Are they at all targets, or just help people understand the distinction?
Well, Ismail Haniyeh was on that list, and he was assassinated a number of weeks ago, presumably by the Israelis. That happened in Tehran. We're still waiting for any response, military response from Iran after that happened. So yes, there is a so-called political branch of Hamas, and they had been doing some of the negotiations. In the past few weeks, however, where we were hoping for a breakthrough, even Secretary of State Antony Blinken said we're down to the nitty-gritty, he said about 10 days ago. Hamas hasn't been directly involved in those negotiations, i.e. they're not sitting at the table, physically sitting at the table, but they are negotiating through mediators, largely in Egypt, who has done their bidding in the past anyway, and the Qataris, who are kind of mediators on behalf of the United States and the Palestinians and Hamas, for that matter. So these talks had been going on. As you said, they were going on in Egypt. They've been going on in Qatar. It felt like we were getting close to a breakthrough because of the messages that we've been getting. Even here at the Pentagon, we were waiting for some sort of announcement because everybody here is still fully poised. And a lot of it has to do with those talks and whether Iran's going to have any reaction to it. Iran's holding fire for now. as to whether or not they're going to go ahead. And then, of course, we have this development over the weekend where 6 hostages were killed, possibly executed. Now, does that speed up the urgency of the talks, as the White House has said? And as you can see, those tens of thousands of protesters in Israel demanding ceasefire talks now, get the rest of the hostages out now while they're alive? Or does it throw into a more tumultuous situation where how do you negotiate with people, as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said, who is executing hostages? So this is where we are now, and we really need to see how the next 48, 72 hours unfold. Vlad?
Charlie, really quickly before I let you go, Prime Minister Netanyahu, does he survive this political fallout? I mean, people are calling for his resignation. It doesn't look like he's going to. They've been doing that for quite some time, since October 7th, even before that, but it doesn't look like he's going anywhere. Am I right? Just based on your years of covering the region.
Yeah, you know, this guy does not quit. And he was already on the ropes before October 7th. And then, of course, October 7th happened on his watch. And is he mishandling it? As you can see, there is growing rage inside Israel. How he can hold on politically, he's always survived. He does have some support, but he's starting, it's disintegrating at high levels.
All right, Charlie Daggett reporting from the Pentagon. Charlie, thank you as always for your reporting and analysis. We appreciate you. All right, turning now to another conflict, the war in Ukraine. This morning, Ukraine's foreign minister submitted his resignation ahead of an expected cabinet reshuffle by President Volodymyr Zelensky. It comes as the latest Russian attack has killed at least 7 people in Ukraine's western city of Lviv. Yesterday, a Russian missile hit the Ukrainian city of Poltava, killing more than 50 and injuring hundreds more. Let's bring in CBS News foreign correspondent Remy Inocencio, who's tracking all the developments from London. Remy, how significant is the foreign minister's resignation? What does it mean?
Sure, Vlad, good to see you. And this is quite significant, really. Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba tendering his resignation, and Parliament will consider it at its next session, so it's not official just yet. But Kuleba, 43 years old, he's been in the job for more than 4 years, and he's become pretty much a well-known face of Ukrainian diplomacy around the world as he's tried to rally both political support, right, and military support for the country, especially in the past few years since this war started. And while his intent to resign comes after one of Russia's biggest strikes that you just mentioned, we really have to look back through the political lens to last week, and that was when Ukraine's President Zelensky already said he was going to do a major reshuffle of his cabinet. We know that several other officials offered their resignations yesterday. That includes 2 deputy prime ministers, the justice minister, and the minister in charge of weapons production for this war. Now, these changes are being seen as a kind of a reset or a reboot, if you will, for new thinking and for potentially new strategies in the government, because right now, as it stands, the war is now 2.5 years in, and of course, still with no end in sight.
And Raymond, what can you tell us about these latest Russian attacks? They appear to be retaliatory.
Yeah, they do appear to be retaliatory. That's the assessment from many watching over the past month, really. In this latest attack in Lviv overnight, just this morning, a mother and her 3 daughters among 7 people we know that were killed. Dozens more were injured. And video from the search and rescue showed the body of one little girl actually being found under the rubble of her home, being carried out on a stretcher. Residents of Lviv reported hearing explosions just before dawn. And by the way, this is just about 40 miles from the border with a NATO member. That's Poland. So this is very close getting to NATO territory here. Poland said that they did scramble jets in order to protect, to defend against their own territory. The mayor of Lviv, by the way, said that Russia launched hypersonic missiles and drones. More than 50 buildings there were damaged. And again, just the latest in a string of attacks each day since Sunday. Yesterday, Moscow's deadliest, 2 missiles hitting Poltava, 50 people killed there, more than 200 more injured. Possible retaliation, as we know that Russia hasn't been able to basically dislodge Ukrainian forces out from the Kursk region, and that happened nearly a month ago.
All right, Ramy, thank you so much for your reporting, my friend. I appreciate you.
You bet.
Okay, let's talk weather now. The city of Phoenix has hit a sweltering milestone, reaching its 100th day of triple-digit temperatures, and the dangerous heat does not show signs of letting up across the western part of the country. CBS Sacramento reporter Sakura Gray is in one of the hottest cities in America right now. Sakura, how high is the temperature expected to get today? I mean, we're talking another triple digit?
Yeah, good morning, Vlad. You can't tell from what I'm wearing, but temperatures are expected to reach about 105 degrees today, and that's not going to let up through the weekend. In fact, temperatures are going to stay in the triple digits through Friday before we see a little bit of a cooling Saturday and Sunday, hitting around the 90-degree mark. So still pretty toasty throughout Sunday. But here in Sacramento, we really are no stranger to extreme heat. We've been seeing these extreme weather days throughout the summer. But the thing that we do take seriously here are those extreme heat illnesses. When we talk about heat-related deaths in Sacramento County, we've had 3 just this year. So every time these extreme temperatures roll around, cooling centers like the one I'm standing just in front of, they're open throughout the course of those extreme heat days so that folks are able to have some sort of refuge from the sun.
So, Sakura, as you know, it's high school football season. As the heat comes in full force, will that impact games and practices? You know, young men and even young women who are out there on the field, and with these kinds of temperatures, it's not really healthy.
Yeah, Vlad, exactly. I mean, back to school is synonymous with high school football season. And with that, California actually has a governing body for high school sports, and they've created new mandates to make sure that students are protected during these extreme heat days. So, in fact, we visited a school yesterday and got to see firsthand these thermometers that high school campuses have. And these thermometers are specialized, and they're able to track the temperature in the air and in the ground to make sure it is safe for students to practice. Now, the number that these thermometers spit out helps the coaches understand what exactly the policies are for practices. So on the less extreme side, this could mean more water breaks and shorter practices. And then on the more extreme side, this can look like actually moving down practices to a later time or rescheduling them completely.
Wow. Okay. Sakura, thank you so much. We appreciate your reporting. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with the first look at the national forecast. Man, Grant, triple digits, 100 days. It's nuts.
It really is. I mean, I know, 100 degrees is just par for the course out there in Phoenix, but you're right. When you start thinking about 100 days of 100-degree temperatures, and it continues. The thing, though, is it's the entire West Coast that's in this heat wave right now. I mean, look at this. From Southern California all the way to Washington. Heat advisories or excessive heat warnings. 62 million people now in some sort of heat alert. And obviously that does include Phoenix. It's going to be hot there, even for the Phoenix area. Temperatures are at 110 degrees this afternoon. Bakersfield, 106. LA, by the way, 96 degrees. And then we're just looking at that heat extending all the way up the West Coast. In fact, as we head through the next few days, look at these forecast high temperatures, triple digits, even Phoenix running close to 10 degrees warmer than normal. But as you head up the West Coast, up into the Pacific Northwest, those temperatures are 10 to 20 degrees warmer than normal for this time of the year. The heat builds into tomorrow. We'll see a lot more record temperatures set or broken tomorrow. But Sacramento, triple-digit heat through at least Friday. Saturday, there's the cool down, 96 degrees, but sunshine all the way through the weekend. Vlad.
All right, Grant, we'll check in with you a bit later. Thanks, man.
All right.
A top issue for voters is the focus of both the presidential campaigns as they clash over economic policies. We're going to dive into their latest proposals coming up next. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Vice President Kamala Harris will unveil her plans to grow the economy during a campaign event in New Hampshire today, including a proposal for tax benefits for new small businesses. It comes as former President Donald Trump gears up to reveal his economic plan here in New York tomorrow. Let's bring in CBS News campaign reporter Shauna Mizell to talk about this and what we can expect to hear from the vice president. So, Shauna, we have learned a little bit of what Vice President Harris's small business proposals are, but break it down for us.
Vlad, good morning. It's great to be with you today. Vice President Kamala Harris is going to be in New Hampshire today, where she will unveil this new part of her economic plan. As we know, the economy is a top issue for many voters across the country. So what Harris will be unveiling today is a plan to propose increasing tax deductions for small businesses. And this would increase tax deductions tenfold. It currently sits at $5,000. Harris wants to increase that to $50,000. And she also wants to increase the number of small business applicants that go through the Biden administration by up to 25 million. I think right now that number is a little bit under 20 million.
And as we know, Harris and former President Donald Trump are going to face off next week in their first presidential debate. There had been some back and forth, as you know, Shauna, about the rules as set by ABC. At one point, the Harris campaign wanted the microphones that the two candidates are wearing to be open, meaning that you could hear them while the other was perhaps answering a question from the moderators. ABC News, who's hosting this debate, had said, no, the mics are not going to be open. And it sounds like the Harris campaign has finally agreed to those rules.
Yes, and these are going to be the same set of rules that were in place when Biden was leading the top of the Democratic ticket. The mics were muted at that debate in Atlanta, Georgia. And so this is going to be the same set of rules when we see Harris and Trump match up in Pennsylvania next week.
And what do we think? What are we learning from the Harris campaign about how she's preparing? Like, who's playing the role of Donald Trump in the debate prep?
We know that Harris began preparing for the debate in Washington, D.C. on the campus of Howard University, her alma mater. But after she does this stop in New Hampshire, she's actually going to head to Pennsylvania, where the debate is going to take place. She's going to remain in Pennsylvania throughout the week and up into the debate, doing some stops there, but also doing her debate prep in this crucial battleground state.
All right, Shauna Mizell reporting for us this morning. Thank you, Shauna. All right, so let's break down what's happening over at the Trump campaign. Let's bring in CBS News campaign reporter Torian Small. So, Torian, a pre-taped town hall that was hosted by Fox News will air tonight featuring the former president. What should we expect to hear?
We should expect to hear the former president, talk about the economy. It's been his bread and butter since he's taken to the campaign trail, looking to make the case to voters that if you think that you had a better financial opportunities, opportunities for financial avenues under the Trump administration, that's the reason why you should re-elect him. We're also expecting to hear him talk quite a bit about IVF. This was a proposal that he brought up a week ago on the campaign trail, announcing that the government will either mandate insurance companies or the federal government itself to cover the cost of IVF in an attempt to help families looking to bring in, as he said, more babies into the country. How that would be paid for is something that he has yet to lay out.
The other thing that happened out in Trump world, as you know, Torian, is J.D. Vance criticized Kamala Harris's economic policies in an interview on Fox News last night. How has the campaign outlined what they want to do for Americans financially? The markets are strong. There was a bit of weakness yesterday, but overall, the market is up tremendously over the last 3 years, both the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones Industrial Average. The economy is growing. Inflation in certain places is still high. Groceries and goods of that nature are still relatively high for Americans. But how are they seeking to sort of get people to think about the things that they would be able to do should they win the White House?
Due to traditional conservative values, they're looking to shrink the government. They're panning Kamala Harris's economic proposal, saying that it's too much involvement, and also this through line of the fact that she's been the vice president for the last 4 years. They're saying, why couldn't she lend a voice to the president's ear and implement some of these policies that she's promising to do if she's elected? The clear case that they're trying to make here is that between the Biden administration, which they're tethering Harris to, and the Trump administration, where do voters actually think the credible messenger on the economy has been? And according to polls, a lot of voters say they feel like they've been doing better, or they were doing better financially under Donald Trump.
All right, Torian Small for us from our bureau in D.C. Thank you, Torian. Okay, you may remember this viral video of a Las Vegas defendant jumping over the court bench and attacking. It's over here? No. There it is. This is a virtual studio, folks. Pretty cool. So this video, right? There's that dude. He jumps over, attacks that judge, in his hearing. Well, guess what? He is back in court today and facing a slew of new charges. We've got the details ahead. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Here's a look at some of the top stories we are following for you this morning. A teenager accused of shooting 49ers rookie wide receiver Ricky Pearsall is set to be arraigned today. He now faces attempted murder charges. Authorities say the 17-year-old tried robbing Pearsall Saturday afternoon in San Francisco's busiest shopping district. The NFL player was then shot in the chest and rushed to the hospital, but folks, he's okay. He was released the next day. Prosecutors are deciding whether that teenager should be tried in an adult court. And happening today in Las Vegas, the defendant who dove over that courtroom bench to attack that judge presiding over his case is set to return to court. Jury selection continues in the trial against Deobra Redden. He's facing 9 charges for assaulting the presiding judge, including battery and attempted murder. At the time of the attack, the judge was getting ready to deliver his sentencing in a separate attempted battery case. And moving over to the East Coast, a former top aide to New York governors Kathy Hochul and Andrew Cuomo has been charged with acting as a foreign agent for the Chinese government in exchange for benefits worth millions. Linda Sun and her husband were arrested and pleaded not guilty to a slew of charges. Federal prosecutors say, among other things, Sun blocked representatives of the Taiwanese government from having access to high-level officials in New York and shaped New York governmental messaging to align with Chinese priorities. All right, nearly 7 years ago, a major fire broke out at a residential building in London. It killed 72 people. This was a devastating, horrific, terrible fire, and the investigation into the fire at the Grenfell Tower, which you're seeing on your screen right now, reveals failures by the government of the United Kingdom, builders, contractors, and a lack of strategy from those first responders who arrived onto the scene. This was the UK's biggest fire since World War II. Sadly, tragically, residents were trapped inside this high-rise apartment building. A retired judge that headlined the inquiry says all of these deaths were all avoidable. I want to bring in BBC correspondent Ellie Price, who is at the site in West London where that fire happened years ago. Ellie, we all remember watching this unfold on our screens here in the United States. I know for those of you in the UK who covered it, the horror was real, as you, in many cases, many people reporting from the scene saw this building burning and could understand what was happening inside because so many people were trapped. What did you learn reading through this inquiry, and what are people to take away from it?
Well, as you say, it was an absolutely horrendous time all those years ago, 7 years ago. Now, this inquiry has been going on for the last 6 years, and today we've had the result of that inquiry. The report spans 17,000 pages, and I want to bring some of the key phrases that we've pulled out of that report to really paint a picture of what went wrong. So we hear about there was a path to disaster that led not just in the years to the run-up to the fire, but decades in the run-up to the fire. As you mentioned there were problems with the government, the central government here at Westminster, that the governments had, to many extent, had plenty of opportunities. There'd been other fires in a similar situation to this one, and lessons hadn't been learnt from those fires. From 2010 onwards, there was a real insistence from central government here that there should be deregulation, so that had an impact on safety, and that often safety was ignored, delayed, or even disregarded. And then, of course, there were the companies that were responsible for the materials that were built onto the tower behind me that were responsible for the fire. We've heard a lot in this report about the cladding, about the insulation that was essentially attached to the outside of the building. And in the report, we heard that many of those companies responsible for those materials showed a systematic dishonesty about the safety of those materials, and that they indulged in a deliberate and sustained strategy and scheme to mislead those putting the materials on about how safe they were. Then we move on to the refurbishment of the tower, the people behind that, so the architects, as you say, the contractors, even the local council, how they had in some instances acted dishonestly, in other instances been incompetent in varying different degrees. And of course, that tenant management organisation, the organisation essentially that's meant to be the go-between between the residents and the people that own the building, how they had let down the residents and treated them often as militant troublemakers. Quickly, I want to just tell you about this also. As you mentioned before, that the way the London Fire Service reacted, how there should have been more training, we hear, because of fires that had acted in a similar way, but the training for the firefighters on the ground was not sufficient. And then finally, how those who survived, the families who survived, how they were treated and how that was inadequate in the aftermath of the fire.
Ellie, one of the things that this fire, I think, brought into stark contrast for people outside of the United Kingdom was just this level of classism that exists in Britain, where you had people who were of lower income living in this tower. And as you point out, the report points out that a lot of the warnings were ignored by officials for many, many years. In other words, residents were saying that the building was unsafe, but for many people, they had nowhere else to live, and people ignored their warnings until this devastating fire. So how are now the victims, the families of those victims, responding to this report? And what has the government said to them in the wake of all of this?
Well, as you might imagine, the government has been very open-minded. It says it's going to take on board all the recommendations that have been made in the report. And of course, it's essentially apologised to those living in the situation that they found themselves. Let me just draw a picture of where I am. Behind me, you can see a memorial wall that's been stood here ever since the fire was ripped through this tower. And above it remains what's left of the tower. In its shroud, the worst of it obviously hidden by a sheeting, but very much this is a testament to what happened in 2017 that still stands here and overlooks this community in West London, and it is very much part of the geography of this part of London. Now, we have heard from members, different groups attached to those who survived and people who lost people in this terrible fire. Many of them say that they have cautiously welcomed some of the recommendations, but they say justice, they feel, still has not been delivered. And that's because there have been no criminal prosecutions with regards to this fire on any level of anyone who may have been deemed to be responsible. Now, that's because the police have always said that they want the public inquiry to happen first. And now that's happened. The police say they'll need another year to 18 months to go through their investigation. So we're not looking at any criminal prosecutions being brought till the end of 2026. So justice, it would seem, is still some way off. And I should mention also, there's been a lot of debate about what should happen to the tower now that, after all these years on from the fire. Well, residents and indeed the families have said they don't want any memorial to stand in this place of this tower yet until they feel that justice has been done. And as I say, that could be some years on from now.
Yeah, justice delayed. Justice delayed is justice denied. Ellie Price, thank you very much for your reporting and extensive analysis of this horrible, horrible situation. We appreciate it. All right, back to politics now. We're a little more than 60 days away from the presidential election here in this country, and the Department of Justice is expected to make an announcement today about a top concern leading up to Election Day around the subject of national security. So for more on this, I want to bring in CBS News Congressional correspondent Scott McFarland to break down what we can expect. So Scott, this is happening later today. What should viewers be looking out for?
Yeah, the Department of Justice has invited us all here at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, promising an announcement involving election security. No small issue at any point in time, certainly no small issue with just more than 60 days until Election Day, in just a few days till some of the first absentee ballots start going out. There have been all kinds of concerns, Vlad, about the potential for foreign interference and foreign meddling in this election, as was seen in previous recent elections. Foreign actors trying to either sow misinformation or sow doubt in the minds of voters. So we'll watch for what announcement the Department of Justice makes and what, if any, type of enforcement action it can attempt if it's potentially foreign interference, those who are not here in the United States to be prosecuted. But I'll note this. We asked the White House press secretary yesterday if President Biden has concerns about the potential for election interference or unrest after November 5th, and she said his concerns remain profound, in part because Donald Trump continues to trade in conspiracy theories and sow seeds of doubt himself.
Yeah, and as you know, Scott, in a recent interview, indicated that he had every right to interfere in the 2020 election. You're also following the criminal hearing in a D.C. court as it relates to the former president. What are we expecting in that courtroom?
3 blocks away tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. It's the next court hearing in the USA versus Donald Trump election conspiracy case. It's been a while. It's been more than a half a year since this courtroom has opened to proceedings in this case because they were frozen, as you'll recall, by the appeals on the issue of presidential immunity, an appeal that went to the Supreme Court and a ruling July 1st that may shape the contours of this case, may narrow it or change a bit of its trajectory. We know the special counsel will make an argument tomorrow about what he sees fit, what he thinks should be the next steps in this case. We know the same 4 charges apply, the same 4 felonies are still in place against Donald Trump, though we expect Trump's legal team to try to get this thing kicked, to get it dismissed, likely to cite that Supreme Court ruling. All of this begins playing out in person before Judge Tanya Chutkan tomorrow here in Washington.
All right, Scott, thanks so much. We appreciate it as always. All right, let's go back to weather now and bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with another look at the national forecast. Grant.
Hey, thanks, Vlad. Starting off looking at still the heat that's going to be building across the West Coast today. It's already hot in portions of California and Arizona. You expect that, right? But the way that the heat is going to build today really is crazy. Vegas current temperatures are at 84. It's 87 degrees in Phoenix. But notice the temperatures up toward the Pacific Northwest. 58 degrees in Seattle right now. That's not bad, right? The way the heat builds across, especially the northwestern part of the country over the next couple of days really is an impressive thing. Forecast highs up towards Seattle today are at 78 degrees. Meanwhile, Spokane is at 90 degrees. Meanwhile, you have that triple-digit heat all the way across portions of Oregon down through California, and then the heat just continues to build. We're talking several record high temperatures expected, if not today, certainly as we go through Thursday and Friday, with those temperatures running over the Pacific Northwest, anywhere between 10 to 20 degrees above normal. Across the rest of the country, you've got pleasant weather, more fall-like weather across the Ohio Valley into the Northeast, but flooding concerns continue to build from Texas all along the north central Gulf Coast, where some places in Texas have already seen over 7 inches of rain over the last 48 hours, and more rain is on the way. Flood watch is in effect from coastal Texas into Louisiana, even to portions of coastal Mississippi, where that flood threat will continue to slide to the east over the next couple of days. Still along the coast of Texas, down towards Corpus Christi, Port Aransas, 2 to 4 inches on top of what's already fallen. There along coastal Louisiana, even as far east as New Orleans, they could pick up between 4 to 5 inches of rain. Some places could even see upwards of 7 inches of rainfall, and that flooding threat is going to continue to slide to the east as we go through the next couple of days. So you've got heat in the west, you've got a soaked south, and then fall-like weather continuing over the northeast for at least a couple more days. Vlad, back over to you.
All right, Grant. Thanks so much, brother. We'll talk to you a little bit later in the show. All right, Congress is once again up against the clock to fund the government and avoid a possible shutdown. What we know about House Speaker Mike Johnson's latest plans. This is CBS News 24/7. Today, House Speaker Mike Johnson is expected to reveal his plan to extend government funding ahead of the September 30th deadline for a new budget. The Republican-led plan would provide funding until March 2025, giving the new presidential administration time to take office. Congress is set to resume next week. So for more on this, let's bring in CBS News Congressional correspondent Nicole Killian. So, Nicole, what do we know about Speaker Johnson's plans?
Well, we know that he's been briefing Republicans, rank and file members, as well as leadership on his plans. What he would like to do is to extend government funding into next March, but the controversy behind his potential push is that many Republicans want to add another measure onto this government funding package called the SAVE Act, which would only allow American citizens to vote in elections, which is pretty much already the case. It would bar, obviously, those who are undocumented immigrants from taking part in elections. But again, that's a law that's already on the books. So from that standpoint, there is some concern on the part of Democrats about, again, in their view, attaching so-called poison pills to any type of must-pass government funding package. So, Vlad, I know we've had these conversations many times over the years. You know, there's always this attempt, it seems sometimes, to try to sweeten the pot. That doesn't always fly on the other side of the aisle. So basically, that is kind of the fight that could potentially be in the works this month when lawmakers return.
So what do we expect that fight to look like, Nicole? Will this pass?
Well, again, you know, certainly Democrats don't want to attach a provision like this to government funding, but this is something that's being pushed, for instance, by members of the House Freedom Caucus. So, and then also, of course, many Republicans, you know, want to tighten the fiscal reins, too, with respect to spending. So that's where they may hit loggerheads with Democrats, not only in the House, but certainly in the Senate, where they certainly don't want to see anything attached to a potential government funding bill.
All right, Nicole Killian reporting from Capitol Hill for us this morning. Nicole, as always, we appreciate you. Thanks.
You bet.
Ugandan Olympic athlete Rebecca Cheptegei is fighting to stay alive after being set on fire by her boyfriend in Kenya. That's according to police there. They say her boyfriend covered her in petrol, gasoline, then lit her on fire during an argument. She is now in critical condition, receiving treatment for burns on 75% of her body. She's a distance runner, and she competed in last month's Paris Olympics. Can you believe that? An athlete whose boyfriend decided to light her aflame with gasoline. Terrible, terrible story. Okay, now onto this. Pro-Palestinian protesters have returned to Columbia University. It is the first day of classes, and students from the Justice for Palestine group have been demanding the university divest from Israel since the spring semester. The alma mater statue, which is at the center of campus, was doused with red paint yesterday. At least 2 people were arrested there. 7 states have filed a lawsuit to block the Biden administration policy that would lower or eliminate debt for millions of student loan borrowers. The suit claims the Department of Education's proposal is against the law. The student loan forgiveness plan is expected to be finalized this fall, but the states argue this administration is cutting corners to begin canceling debt sooner. The White House has not yet commented on this suit. All right, coming up, something a little lighter for you. Summer may be almost behind us, but we can keep the vibes alive with some music. We got Billboard's top songs of summer ahead. You're streaming CBS News 24/7. Last election, more than 80% of white evangelical Protestants voted for Donald Trump. And now a group of charismatic Christians are hoping to help re-elect him. CBS News chief Washington correspondent, that is, Major Garrett has more.
In Eau Claire, Wisconsin, this summer, a tent revival attracted hundreds of charismatic Christians to receive revelation and wade into the gospel of Trumpism.
The Holy Spirit lives inside of you.
Tens of thousands joined online, all part of the so-called Courage Tour, a religious road show that is unapologetically political.
You can't make America great again until you restore an awakening with God again.
The goal? Motivate fellow charismatic Christians, many of whom don't belong to a formal church structure but find God in wonders and miracles, to evangelize for Donald Trump all the way to November.
We believe it's time to release the roar of Christian voters across America.
Joshua Standifer is part of the Courage Tour.
Do you mean Christian voters or do you mean pro-Trump Christian voters?
It's all the above.
It sounds to me like most of this messaging is pro-Trump.
You are literally seeing 2 sets of values and worldviews on display. And it just so happens one naturally aligns more to what we believe.
In Trump, evangelicals don't see an abrasive, thrice-married billionaire. They do see an anti-establishment leader strong on abortion, gender issues, and Israel.
I want people to vote because he stands for something.
Brother and sister attendees Jackie Brokaw and David Jansen.
2020 is a fraud, and everybody knows it.
The number of Christians that are in this area, if they would vote, they could swing this county, which would probably swing the rest of the state.
The Courage Tour targets key counties in battleground states, including places where Trump lost narrowly in 2020. In addition to voter mobilization, organizers want charismatic Christians as poll watchers and workers.
We are seeing here today is the most targeted and tactical voter mobilization effort done by Christian nationalists ever.
Matthew Taylor has written extensively about this new form of religious activism that fuses political outcomes with divine intervention.
What is the political import, possibly, in the 2024 election of events like this? Well, if Trump wins, then that becomes a part of the impetus that Donald Trump can say, I don't just have a democratic mandate, I have a divine mandate to change the country in accordance with the biblical values that these folks claim to have.
You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians.
Trump's election denialism electrified and galvanized charismatics online for weeks leading up to the January 6th Capitol riot.
January 6th was not an insurrection. It was an election fraud intervention.
Many of the people who were leaders in this movement also showed up on January 6th because they really believed that the election was being stolen.
As part of our visit to Eau Claire, we spoke with Lance Wallnau, a Courage Tour leader who rarely gives interviews about why he views Trump as anointed by God.
Pray for me, because I'm going to try to talk to some media folks that are here.
Tomorrow, we will hear from Wallnau on how Trump, a twice-divorced man with felony convictions, can maintain such a hold on charismatic Christians. For Eye on America, I'm Major Garrett in Eau Claire, Wisconsin.
All right, let's forget about politics for just a moment and talk about songs of the summer, because Billboard just dropped its Songs of the Summer chart, and the top 10 includes some awesome artists, including Billie Eilish for Birds of a Feather and Teddy Swims for Lose Control. But I want to play for you the top 3, starting with number 3.
They not like us. They not like us. They not like us.
That's Kendrick Lamar's Not Like Us. I gotta say, this to me is number 1. I could be wrong. I guess I am based on Billboard, but from everything I've seen this summer out in the clubs, out on the streets, this is the number 1 song of the summer. But let's go to the number 2 spot. Let's play that.
Someone pour me up a double shot of whiskey. They know me and Jay Daniels got a history.
All right, this is my favorite song of the summer. This is just me, my personal opinion. My favorite song of summer of 2024, a bar song, Tipsy by Shabuzi, which is number 2. And are you ready for the number 1 song of summer? Tom, you ready? Ahmed, ready? You guys ready? Ready? All right, Matt, roll it. That is I Had Some Help by Post Malone featuring Morgan Wallen. I would say that all 3 of these songs I've been hearing all summer long. I am surprised that Chappell Roan is not on here. Chappell? Young people in the control room, is it Chappell? Is it Chappelle? What is it? Chappell Roan. Her stuff has been blowing up. Tommy, you're like in your 60s. You love it. All right, let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore. He's going to tell me what his favorite. Dude, have you not heard Not Like Us, and Chappell Roan all over the place along with Shabuzi?
It's every day. It's every day. Flipping through the radio stations or listen on Spotify or whatever it is. It's there. Their songs are everywhere for sure. Even my kids know some of those songs. I don't know if that makes me a bad parent. I don't know. But
the kids do know. And I'm not a kid anymore. I'm not a kid anymore, Grant. My song of the summer is, going back to my childhood, Summer Breeze by Seals and Croft. Or More Than a Feeling. That was my college summer song by Boston, even though I was a couple of years young when it came out. But I remember that song being clear. And in my true childhood, it was like We Got the Beat by the Go-Go's. So I'm just dating myself all through this segment, Grant.
Isn't that funny, though, how songs just take you back to your youth in the summertime, for sure. Vlad, real quick here, let's talk about this rain that we've got out across the area. Flooding rains across the North Gulf states as we go through the next couple of days. Some places there in southern Louisiana could see over a half foot of rainfall. Meanwhile, still very fall-like. No more summer heat across the Northeast, but it's still very much summertime. I'm sure they're going to be cranking those tunes over on the West Coast, Vlad.
All right, Grant Gilmore. Feel that summer breeze, brother. We'll talk to you tomorrow. An encore
we'll do.
of CBS Mornings coming up next.